Okay, everyone. Today I'm going to be teaching how to start a React Native application from scratch. First thing first, the idea of using React Native is that we can use one single code base to deploy an iOS and an Android application using React language and features, using standard JavaScript or TypeScript. For that, React Native, what it does is provide some components that translate to actually native components in each platform, in Android and iOS. So you get a real nice performance and memory management that you don't get, for example, by using Ionic or other tools to be deploying to both platforms. To start a React Native application, you actually have two ways of doing that. You can use the default React Native client, and by using this, you have to be a kind of knowledge in mobile development. For example, you have to be familiar with Xcode in iOS and Android Studio to develop in Android. That's a little too complex for beginners. So we are going to be using another tool called the export client. What that does is it provides a series of tools and services to make development real easy. So we are going to be using the export client for that. And one final concept when using the export client is that they have two different workflows. For example, you can use, they have what is called the managed workflow, where the expo tools and services, they handle everything. You don't have to look into iOS and Android specific code. You only write JavaScript. And you also have the bare workflow that you can actually go into native code, go into Xcode and Android Studio to implement some more complex stuff, and you have total freedom. One good thing to know is that you can switch from a managed workflow to a full React Native workflow very easy with just one command. So you are not tired. You can start a project with Expo, and then if your project requires, you can actually go full React Native. And yes, those are the basic concepts. Let's start building our demo. For that, we are going to be using the Expo client. We are going to be creating a JavaScript project, so not TypeScript for now. And I'm using a tool to reflect my device in the screen, so you can actually see what I'm doing in my mobile phone. I'm only going to be testing on iOS, but the application will work exactly the same in Android. So yes, just to let you know that. Let's see how it goes. Okay, perfect. So with that, we have our basic React Native project using Expo. What I wanted to mention here is that in a React Native project, you will actually have two additional folders here, one called iOS and one called Android, where you can actually go to the native code of React Native and do some additional stuff. But in here, you see using Expo, that's all hidden and managed by Expo. You don't have to look into that. The application configuration is done in the app.json file. In here, you define the name of the application, the orientation, the icons, if you want to use dark mode or no, the splash screen, and some specific configuration for iOS and Android you can actually set here. And this is translated to the Xcode and Android Studio behind doors, so you don't have to look into that. Let's start the application. Let me open a terminal here. When using the Expo tools, it's very easy to work in a mobile device. They provide you with a QR code that you scan with your phone. And then you can work by changing the code, and the application automatically reload the UI. For this, you have to install this application that is available in the App Store and Play Store. And with that, you can develop using these tools. So I open this, and you can see showing these tools. If I change it, something, you can see it reflects automatically. So one thing to notice here, starting to see the concepts. The application starts in this component, the app function. We have a view component that is similar to div in web development. Works something similar to that. Text and status bar. Status bar is actually this bar up here. You can change how the bar look. We have the dark and light mode. Of course, when you set it to light, you won't see it because the background is light. So for now, we are going to be using dark or auto. Let's change it to dark. Okay. I'm going to be showing some important things of the difference between React and ReactNative when working with these components, so you can actually build up some basic applications. For the view, one important thing to notice is that it uses the style flexpot only. In ReactNative, you only use flexpots for styling. For example, if we add additional text here, you can see that it is shown one below the other. In web development, if you will do that, you will see them show from left to right. This is one of the important difference. Here, you actually have to change the direction if you want it to work like in the web. But since the mobile devices are always vertical, so they approach it differently. So they show one below the other. Another thing, important difference from React to ReactNative is that all the text have to be grabbed around the text component. So if by mistake you add something outside of the text component, you actually get an error. And that's the only thing that they have still to improve in ReactNative. One of the main things that of this kind of errors, specifically the text one, it won't show you where the error is. So you have to be very careful of that. Let me see, what else? So yes, important. In ReactNative, we have, let me see, let me add a bigger text here. And let me change this to have it on the top of the screen. Also, one important thing we're working with, specifically with iOS devices most of the time, you can see that it can get behind the notch they added, and even sometimes can get behind this bar. So for that, we have to use the first component they created, a SafeAreaView. So let's use that. We have to grab all our code in that. And let's import it. Perfect, import automatically. And with that, you can see that it handles the notch and this bar automatically. Let's see what else. Important, yes. Another thing to know in iOS and Android, different from the web, is that you don't get a scroll view functionality by default. You actually have to add the scroll view component to the code to actually have the scroll view functionality. So let's add that. Okay, it's not imported. Okay, let's import that. And now you can see that you can scroll in your device. The next component I want to talk about is the text input. To enter text, let's add it up here. Well, let's add some styling too. So here I'm going to be using React state to actually handle this. So let's create this state, perfect. Okay. And we are going to be using setting the input value in the text input, and on change, we are going to be updating the value, and we are also styling the text input to make it look nice. I forgot to import it. Let's start it. And you can see here is the style. And let me scroll and type something. So it's working. But I wanted to show you the text input because there is another thing you need to know of mobile development. Let's add this at the bottom of this the scroll bar, for example. If I try to input some text here, you will see that the keyboard actually hides the component, and by default, you cannot do anything about it. So you have to handle the keyboard in these cases. For that, they provide us with the keyboard about view to grab this UI in there. Let's grab this. Let's add this here. Let's import it. Important to know, this is the default configuration. They provide this line of code in the ReactNative documentation. Pretty much, we use the platform utility to know which system we are running. We can know if iOS or Android, or Windows or web or Mac OS. You can build applications using ReactNative for those two. In iOS, you actually have to play with the padding to display the text both in the right position. And in Android, the standard is to play with the height of the component. So let's see. I go to the bottom, and you can see that when if I tap the text input, it does the scrolling and everything automatically, so you can actually type here. That's the keyboard avoid view. I actually don't use this component much most of the time because it's really difficult to use. This time it was easy because it was only one text input. But once your application gets more complex, it's really difficult to use this component, I think. So I pretty much depend on third-party libraries to handle the keyboard management. But we have another, you can play with the position and everything. So you can actually do more of the work with this, but it's very, very difficult. Now let's play with a button. Let me remove all these tests to actually have something to show here. Let's create a list of items so we can actually save the text we are entering. Okay. Let me see. Let's add a button here to work with that. Button. ReactNative also provides a button component. ReactNative actually provides a lot of components for handling inputs. For example, touchable highlight. If you want to add a highlight effect to one of the views you have in your UI, you can use that. You can use touchable opacity to handle to have an effect of changing the opacity of the component. You can also have without feedback that actually adds the on-press event to any view you want, but you don't when the user tap that component, it won't get a feedback. So you have many options to how do you want handle your events. The good thing about button is that it have all the styling, the user effect in Android versus iOS. You don't have to handle CSS to style this component. So let's use that. We have input, we have items. And you can see that since I'm running a device, I'm running this application in iOS, you can see the button look like this. So it's the default style in an iOS application. So let's see if this works. We also want to loop through these items once we save them. Let's use that items. And let's display the text component that they use. So right now we are not showing any item, but you can see the text got shrinked. So let's fix that. For that, we have to add some styling here, I think. Okay, let's add it to the text input to make it full width. We can use we can add some styling here to make it look full width. But we also have to style the scroll view. At the modify content. Okay, it's not working as I was expecting. Well, let's continue. Let's add this text input at this bottom of side of the scroll view. And let's grab this in a view. So we will have the text input and the button together, but we won't have them scroll. So let's add some text here. Style. By content, let's say center. No, it's not doing. Okay, no, doesn't matter. Let's add some text. Some really small text for now. Testing, and we can add we can save, and you can see it shows in the scroll view. What we are doing this is looping through the items and displaying the items in the text component. We can add another one, text 2. and you can see that it's showing there. Another important thing here is, another important component is this one. You can see in here we have the scroll view and some items. This is a very common pattern in mobile development where we have a list of items. In Android, it's called a list, but in iOS, it's called a table view. So we are going to rewrite this using a different component that does pretty much everything we want here. Right now, we are going to remove this status bar code and move it here. So we have this clean. The component we are going to be using is called Flatness. What it does is it has a scroll view and some items, so it's have everything integrated. Let's try to do it looking like this. Let's import this. And the Flatness component has a property called data. We define the data we want to show, is the items. And we also have a property called render item where we define how do we want to show each item. This receive the item property where we can use this. And you can see that is a lot cleaner than actually having to have a scroll view, some items, and a loop and everything. It does everything by itself. And let's add this style to make it occupy most of the screen. We can remove this. And you can see it looks pretty much the same because it's actually the same in the background. And with that, those are the basic components of ReactNative application. And now what we are going to do is to be able to add navigations in here. Exactly, it works on both. The good thing, since these are standard components, they are translated to iOS and Android depending on each platform. You can trust all these components should work the same in each platform. For this, we have a flag list, but they also have a section list, I think, yes. And this is an even more complex list and table you can use where you have sections, different items in each section, and more complex stuff. So they provide you with that too. So let's keep it simple for now, only using the flag list. And now let's add some navigation because right now everything has been in the same screen, and the final one of the important things when building a mobile application is have navigation. So let's install those dependencies. For that, we are going to be using a library called React Navigation. I think it's the most, is the better one, the best one. So let's import the dependencies. And now I can show you this. For installing dependencies in an Expo managed project, you actually use npx expo install. The idea when using this is that it will install the right version for that each Expo version needs. So this will look into the React Navigation package and look what version of that package work better with Expo 46, for example. So let's do that. You can also do npm install, but it's recommended to use the Expo installer. I forgot some libraries, so let's do that. npm expo npx expo install. The React navigation library has a lot of dependencies because they have a big library before, but then started to have decoupling the module better. So we have to install a lot of dependencies to make it work. And then we can start working on this. The first thing we are going to do is move all this code into a different component, because right now is everything in the app application, but let's clean this. Let's do a copy and paste, and let's call this page 1. And simply have it here. So everything here will be in the page 1 component. And let's clean this up to only import the page 1 component from page 1 and display in the app application. The status bar component can actually be anywhere in your component hierarchy, but let's keep it in the application component to have everything clean. Let's grab this and clean this application from everything. We don't need this space here. And this should work the same. And we have the page 1, very simple. Let's clean this up. This status bar, we don't need it. Just let's leave everything else. So now we have an application only with one page, and we are going to be defining the routes and everything to be able to move from one page to a different page. For that, we are going to be using a navigation container, and we are going to be grabbing our entire application in that. It will handle all the navigation and everything. One important thing to notice here is that this React navigation, instead of being something simple like React router that handles the routes on the application, this library actually have even animations and transitions that the user expects in each platform. So it's a little more complex than just a simple route library. And all that we get all that for free. So we are going to import ReactNative Stack Navigator to create our stack. Let's see. We are going to create a stack to add all the pages we are going to be using, all the routes. And to do that, we do this. We are going to be using this stack we created. We define, we use the navigator component to group the different routes. For example, in here, we are going to have a route called page 1 and with the component we already built, and we are going to be setting his title. And let's remove this. And you can see only when doing this, we actually get a nice header to handle most of the navigation. Now we are going to be creating another route. Let's duplicate this. Page 2. And let's use this component. Let's define the header route. Page 2. Page 2. And let's add another pattern. Yes. Let's say we can add items in this screen. Let's import it. And now we have to actually define what we are going to have here. For the second page, we are only going to have, we are not going to, the idea will be in this page, the first page of the application, show the list of items. And in the second page, have a way to actually add items to the application. So for that, in the second page, we are only going to need the text input and the bottom. So let's only keep those. Everything else, the flatness we won't need. Okay, perfect. We won't need the items. We only want the input. And let's go to the page one and remove the input. And because we remove the input, we actually don't need the component to avoid the keyword. Okay, so to navigate from one screen to the other, we are going to be adding a button up here. For that, we are going to be using this hook. That's the preferred way to do this transition. Yeah, adding these components up here. In here, we are going to be using use layout effect. Probably you are familiar with the other one called use effect, the other hook. The use layout effect is actually the real equivalent to the component did mount from the previous React iterations. This get executed before actually showing something to the user. So we are going to be using this to do some configuration to the header bar, for example, add a button. And after that is done, then the UI will be refreshed. So let's have this. Okay, I don't have the import. Let's use it directly. Okay. Once we add the navigation container to our application, each page actually gets some props to interact with that navigation bar and the navigation and everything. So now we have a button, and we are going to be calling the props navigation navigate to the page 2. That's the name of the second route. So we tell the application we want to transition to the next page. And you can, once I press this button, you can see that the transition happened to the second screen. And as I mentioned, you can see this transition is only in iOS. I can even swipe from the left of the screen. I'm trying to do it. And see this smooth transition that you expect in an iOS application, where you can actually move the finger and go back and forward. In Android, for example, you will get a different transition expected by the Android users. All that you get for free. And to finish this demo, the final thing is how do we enter something here? Let's say test one. And how, once we save, how to send that data back to the first screen. For that, we are going to be rewriting this. Instead of editing the items, because we don't have the items here, we are going to be using the props navigation tool, prop navigation, and we are going to be navigating back to the page 1. But we also want to send some parameters back to that page. We want to be able to send the current input to the first screen. And we do it like this. So once I press the save button, you can see and send back to the first screen. Now, we still need the code to actually receive this in the first page. So let's add that. And for that, we are going to be using a use effect. I think I have to, yeah, okay, perfect. For that, we are going to be accessing the props routes, I think. Let me see. Props route. To receive params in the different page, we are going to be using props route param. And we are going to be checking is props, route parent have a value, but what's the name of the parameter we are sending? We are sending an input parameter. So if we have an input parameter, and let's add this here. Sorry. Every time the input parameter change in the screen, we want to add that item to the list. For that, we are simply using the previous items and appending the new input to the list. Let's remove this. And important. This is the first time I entered to this page, so parent actually doesn't exist. So I have to add the conditional here. Okay. So let's go to page 1. Sorry, to the page 2. Let's add some item here. This one, and press the save button. And it didn't work. So let's see. Okay, important. This is one of the issues when not using TypeScript. The name of this is parents. Let's see, parents. Okay, let's see again. Test 1. And you can see we added the item. Test 2. And you can see we keep adding the items here. Let me see. And I think those are the most important things for this. I don't know if you have any questions so far. Feel free to ask. Let me see. Yes. Okay. To finish, I want to show you one more thing. Not so important, but it's good to handle. In the final minutes, I think I have like 5 minutes. Let's see if I can do it. Using dark mode in these applications. For that, we go to the app.json application. We define that instead of using the light theme, we want to actually be able to switch between light and dark theme. Let's save. I think I have to restart the application. So let me restart this and then start. And in this tool, one thing you can do, if you see got disconnected from the server, from Metro, they call the server Metro, you can actually check your device to present with the option from the tools you have, but you can also hold your screen with 3 fingers. So let's do that and do the reload to force reload of the application. And now let's see if I can do some small things with the dark theme. Let's see. For that, let's go to page 1. For that, you can use the hook use color scheme to get the current thing your device has. You can see we are not using that. Right now I'm using dark mode. So when I press this button, it should change between themes. Let's see if I can get it to work. Right now, we have the background of this page to be always white. Let's do some conditional here. One nice thing you can do in ReactNative is you can add different styling in an array. So we have this, and now let's add some conditions to handle the dark theme. Let's see if the skin is equal to dark, I think. Let's do a different style. Oh, I place it in different place. Let's add it up here. Okay. And you can see that it's changed to dark mode because I was in dark mode, but if I change to light, then we get the light mode. We also have to add that to the navigation. It's very easy. They have this styling here. Let's use the same use scheme. Let's see, it didn't get imported. Where is it? Okay, it didn't import this style. Native. And let's use a different style depending on what the user has selected. We do it like this. And you can see that also the header bar now changes. And pretty much that's the idea to handle the dark mode. To only get, you use the use color scheme to get the current theme. And then in your styling, you can customize how the different components change in each theme. And we will have to do the same in page 2, but I think we are out of time. So, but you follow the same idea. Okay, so yes, I think that's it. Do you have any question? If not, that's everything.
I asked Carlos in the chat, why use export instead of ReactNative directly?
Well, the advantage is it's pretty easy to start. Another thing is you haven't seen me use Xcode or Android Studio. So that's a big plus because, for example, if you only have a Windows machine, you don't need anything else to actually develop for iOS because you don't need a Xcode tool to be able to test. You only need an iPhone, for example. Other thing is they provide with a set of tools. We are going to be seeing another section to actually build the application, deploy into the store directly, and everything is very integrated using these tools. Let me see what else. But well, those are not, you don't need to use Expo to use those tools, but it's convenient. But yes, Expo is pretty much to speed up development. You can actually use basic ReactNative if you know your Xcode and Android Studio. That's the main thing. If you don't want to work with, if you don't have experience working with actually mobile developments, it's better to work with Xpo. On the Flatness. Any other question? Or? Well, I think that's it for today then. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, Carlos.
Oh, it didn't stop. Okay.